empires. It can rattle the seas, send you down to the darkness, hang you on your knees. That's why I gotta know what I am, what I need, and where I stand. 'Cause all I know is I answer
40 contenders. 7 rounds. The road to the Coke Series ends here.
Good evening, race fans, and welcome to iRacing's coverage of the season opening race of the 2023 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series, live from the virtual Las Vegas Motor Speedway in Las Vegas, Nevada. James Pike here alongside Blake McCandless, ready to bring you all of the action from the 2023 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series. Blake, we have arrived towards the end of the calendar year, but also to the middle step of the Road to Pro ladder to the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series and the next step on the road to $300,000.
Well, and James, it's 2 very long roads to get here, depending on how you look at it, between Coke Series drivers that had to go through their grueling 18-race schedule, as well as everybody from the Road to Pro ranks, down to the trucks that had to go through both consecutive rounds of 8 and 7 races, respectively, to have their opportunity to get up into the Coke Series. You could see the way this ladder progresses, James, that we start the qualifying iRacing Series with the Road to Pro trucks. They're down there and are in 2 separate rounds that will take 20 drivers from that. Then, of course, they'll go up against the bottom 20 drivers in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series from this past season. And one thing that's different, James, this is just 7 races to make it happen. We've had season-long journeys to get here, 7 races to try and either keep your spot in the Coke Series or prove that you belong there.
Drivers fighting for eligibility into the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. At the end of this season, the top 20 in the point standings with the ones who gain that eligibility, and then we'll see how they perform in the Coke Series next year. Let's take a look at the schedule for this Contender Series. A few changes from last year, but worth noting, Blake, that every one of these tracks that we see on the calendar for 2023 is also a circuit that the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series visited earlier this year.
They visited it. I remember competing in this series 2 years ago. We had every single track on the schedule but Vegas and Richmond. So a group of tracks, James, that everybody in this field, if they've kind of been to this level before, of which we have many drivers that are in that category, have a lot of experience in these cars, building setups for these racetracks. So in this field, yes, we're talking about making that step up to the ladder, but you have a lot of experience in drivers who have been through this a number of times and are going to be visiting some familiar racetracks over the fall as we narrow down those 20 eligible drivers.
Tonight's racetrack, a pretty familiar one for lots of drivers, and also one of the best mile and a halves in the sim. Blake McCandless, let's take a closer look at Las Vegas Motor Speedway.
Yes, it is, James, and like you said, it's going to be very wide. Of course, as you said, a mile and a half, 20 degrees of banking, of which they are progressive in these turns. So 1 and 2, and especially in 3 and 4 with these Xfinity Series cars. These cars really like, or at least can seem to make the high side work late in the run. Of course, our 2023 Coke Series winner at this track, which, James, we didn't know it at the time, but ended up being his last victory in the Coke Series in Michael Conti, should he decide to retire, and as he's been saying all year long this offseason.
Officially, we haven't hit that mark yet, but you figure. I don't think he'd be one to go back on his word. That's not the Michael Conti that I know, as we have lots of excitement forthcoming from Las Vegas Motor Speedway. It was an entertaining race with the Coke Series, likely going to be an entertaining race here with these cars, as Blake said, utilizing the vehicles of the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Blake, let's take a look at the highlights from Las Vegas earlier this year for the Coke Series.
If you can remember earlier this season when we were here at Las Vegas, you could see the type of racing that we saw. 4 wide drivers cutting across the apron. The draft was very important in these next-gen cars. I wouldn't say that's necessarily what we're going to see tonight, James. And there's a multitude of reasons. One, the next-gen car, the NASCAR Xfinity Series car, are obviously very different. They drive different. They draft different. High horsepower, low downforce in these NASCAR Xfinity Series cars lends itself to kind of getting a little more spread out. And the fact that in the Coke Series, as we've continued to go along, the value of wins has never been more important. That's not necessarily going to be the case tonight, where 15th is probably good enough tonight. And what these drivers are aiming for, they're aiming to be the best of half the field. They're not necessarily aiming to win. So we may not see quite as many desperate moves as what we're seeing right here. You can look back at Ryan Luza and, of course, all of the drivers, James, many of which had issues in this race and will be competing in tonight's race as well.
Fitting how you make a good point there, that some of the drivers that are competing in tonight's race are some of the ones who also had issues in the Coke Series race back earlier on in the calendar years. We see Michael Connie burn it down for what was the last victory of his career, as you said, and got off to a really, really hot start in 2023 as well. But this is about the drivers who are fighting for their place to get back into the Coke Series.
Looking to be winners, as you can see many of our competitors right there as they get ready for everything. And oh man, James, you could see some reactions there. Not great for Vicente. It looks like perhaps didn't get the qualifying lap. They would just be wrapping up qualifying, and I guarantee you Caden Honeycutt, he is very happy about his lap right there. And I think Vicente, they're a little bit of teammates there with each other, so perhaps bumping each other up. But you can see the reactions live, and I think how much qualifying matters, James. That is how happy they are. They know if they set themselves up well with a top 5 starting spot, they're likely going to be in a good points position leaving this race.
And it is all about points, and that threshold of the top 20. That area of focus is different compared to what we see when we watch the Coke Series, when we talk about the playoffs, when we talk about fighting for wins and then fighting your way into the championship four. Here, just make the top 20. That's all you have to do in order to make it into that place where you're eligible for a Coke Series spot next season.
Well, it sounds simple, but if there's anything that I can attest, it's anything but. It is very difficult. You begrudgingly have drivers who were in the Coke Series that almost view this, I don't want to say as an obligation, but they don't want to be here. They feel like they're too good to be in this series. But yet there's a whole crop of drivers, James, that are hungry, that have been working for an entire year to get back to this position. You think about drivers like Brian Mercurio. They were in the Coke Series in 2022, or Ray Alfala as well. They're back here in this series to try and reclaim their spot in the series. So many different agendas, so many different levels of experience, and it all culminates here with very difficult race cars to drive and a very quick stretch to do it. Again, this isn't like Road to Pro or the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series where we have 2 weeks between each race. It's back to back to back, and getting a good start is so important in these opening couple of races.
One more name I think we're throwing out before we get ready to bring you the racing action. Daniel Buttafuoco, who was the first driver that missed a spot in the Coke Series last year. He grew over the course of the last 12 months. We saw a lot of him in the eNASCAR qualifying iRacing Series, where he finished top 20 in points to get here into the Contender Series. And he said, I feel so much more improved as a driver. I feel like I have a lot to prove, and I want to make my way into the Coke Series with authority and not just scrape my way in. Let's take a look at the starting grid for this opening race of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series in 2023.
That's why he was happy. Caden Honeycutt on pole. You could see right there Vicente Salas, again, 2 teammates working together. And remember, James, Salas last year dominant at Phoenix in the opening round.
Salas indeed really, really good at Phoenix. Buttafuoco, who we just talked about, starting on the inside of row 4. Other names that you might know if you watch iRacing on a regular basis, Ryan Luza and Timmy Holmes in the mix there. Brian LaPrade also 2 here. Big time names all throughout this grid.
Yeah, Seth the Merchant, somebody that's been trying to make this series for a number of years, has the opportunity to do it. Joey Brown was somebody that through his Contender Series performance last year we thought would make a big splash in the Coke Series. Wasn't expecting to see him here in this Contender Series after last year, if I had to be honest. And there you can see Ray Alfalla, 4-time, looking to get back in as well.
Ray Alfalla, who had to watch on the sidelines for the very first time this year, the first time ever he was not part of the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series. And wouldn't he love to make a point and say, yes, I can run the trucks, I can run the Xfinity car and get back to the front. A little bit further down the grid, Kevin King and Derek Justice have Coke Series experience. At the back of this field, Colin Keister, a driver with Coke Series experience as well.
Certainly so, and rounding it out with Caden Rush. Also saw Logan Helton there on the list. He was somebody that was actually at the NASCAR Hall of Fame in Charlotte, won the Firecracker 400, which obviously was a big event about 3 months ago, and has carried that momentum right up into the Contender Series. And James, taking a look at this weather, of course, this is randomly generated in iRacing. They have an idea of what it's going to be, but you can see pretty cool conditions right now. 67 degrees, 85-degree track temp. Likely going to be a tight and fast racetrack tonight.
Could be a very tight and fast racetrack indeed. You've got decent weather, pretty much standard fare for iRacing, but the big key, 100 laps, 150 miles, 241 kilometers here at Las Vegas. So not a tremendous amount of time, Blake, to get to the front if you are starting deep in this field.
No, it's not, and we're going to take a look at our eNASCAR race analysis. 100 laps, 150 miles, which was the same distance we were scheduled to run in the Coke Series race this season. You can see the amount of time you lose on pit lane. 3 tire sets laying down in the pits, and of course that pit window, about the fuel windows, roughly 54 laps or so in this race. So likely going to be a one-stop race. We'll see if there's a caution that brings out some separate strategies, but that's likely going to be the case, James. One stop since they can get to the halfway point.
About half a lap away from the green flag here at Las Vegas to open up the Contender Series for 2023. 40 drivers enter this stage of the eNASCAR Road to Pro Ladder, and at the end of it, in 7 races time, 20 of them will advance into the 2024 eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. Aledo, Texas's Caden Honeycutt is the honor of leading the field to green flag to open up the season. He passes underneath the flag stand, as does the field, and we are off and away with the 2023 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series from Las Vegas. Field coming up to full song and thundering here down the back straightaway, still door to door for the most part into turn 1. We saw last year a lot of the mile-and-a-half split. Eventually the field will try and find a way to get towards the bottom and usually string out and go single file, but early on here everybody's still jockeying for position with 1 lap complete.
Yeah, you're going to see that on a lot of these restarts, especially here in Las Vegas. That kind of middle lane or kind of straddling that seam at the bottom is where you're going to see a lot of drivers running the middle. Not going to see a ton running the top in 1 and 2, but maybe late in the run you'll see some drivers kind of venture up to the top side in 3 and 4. But you can see, again, this is going to be kind of the theme of this series, right? You're not going to see the same amount of aggressive moves, although somebody back there, one of the Logitech Altus cars, I believe it may have been Seth the Merchant, got a little squirrely there. There's still 3 wide entering turn 1. That's actually around Ryan Doucette.
Continuing to shuffle on as the yellow flag comes out for the first time. An incident over in the middle of turns 1 and 2, bringing us under caution. You see Blaze Crawford there, one of the drivers involved, but an early yellow flag to slow proceedings in the opening race of the Contender Series at Las Vegas.
It's very low on the racetrack. We'll see if there's really, at least from what we can see right there, not a ton of damage there on the 76 car. Take a look at the right side, and maybe there was just a little bit take one more look at it. Again, I think one thing that's nice here, James, with the way these Xfinity cars have continued to evolve and be updated, is that a little bit of damage is not going to hurt you near as much as it did perhaps a year ago. You could see 3 wide there, King, 43 of Olot, and the 0-4. And honestly, just a case, at least from my vantage point, James, that just didn't know they were 3 wide, and 0-4 kind of comes up a little bit there through the tri-oval. And we saw that. That's nearly an identical replay of what we saw a time or two in the Coke Series race a little bit earlier this year.
I had the opportunity to catch up with the 2022 Coke Series champion Casey Kerwin over the weekend, and we were talking a little bit about what to expect in Contender, and he made the point, as you alluded to just a moment ago, that there are incremental changes year on year, and this is the first year that these cars in the Xfinity Series have the new damage model enabled. A little bit more complex way that iRacing calculates all this, and he said with the new damage model, these drivers are going to be able to race these Xfinity cars like absolute tanks by comparison to what they had a year ago. Here's an onboard with Rise Esports Jonathan Delaney, who had to check up. This all happens right in front of him and just pokes his way down to the bottom, slows up to make sure he doesn't spin on the apron, ducks underneath it all, and comes through clean.
Yeah, solid there. And again, it was a good point that with the composite bodies in these Xfinity Series cars a year ago, just as iRacing continues to evolve and continue to improve the damage model of these cars, you know, that's not going to put you down. It was very aero sensitive a year ago, but now these cars can definitely take a little bit more of a beating. It's not going to impact performance as much. Now, of course, any amount of damage is going to tweak the car just a little bit, but it's certainly not going to have the drastic aerodynamic effect that perhaps it would have had a year ago or so. So not going to see too many drivers in that accident that are at least going to be down and out for the count this early on.
Blaze Crawford is the only driver amongst those that were involved in the incident that is still on pit road, trying to get, in particular, that left front corner fixed up. That's where he took most of the damage on his machine. So we'll keep an eye on Crawford and keep an eye on the rest of the field. And if you want to keep an eye on everything happening in the world of eNASCAR, you can scan that QR code in the lower right-hand portion of your screen using your mobile device and get all the updates from the eNASCAR world, courtesy of iRacing, the official simulation partner of NASCAR. Lights are off on the pace car, so we'll have 1 lap to go. Blake, I'll be completely honest, I was a little surprised at how much these drivers continue to race side by side, albeit we had a small sample size, 3 laps. But I remember Homestead Miami last year in particular, everybody immediately fought to get to the bottom. I figured this being another 1.5 miles, we might see something similar, but didn't start off that way.
No, it didn't. But again, this track really lends itself to kind of that multi-groove racing. And I think 2 or 3 laps give these guys a little bit of time. You're likely going to see kind of that procedure to try to get down to the bottom and really kind of start the run and set your pace, see where your car really is. But again, these drivers know how important these restarts are. The races were a little bit shorter this go around in the Contender Series than what we had. I remember the season opener that I ran in 2 years ago was 200 laps at Phoenix. It's not nearly as long this time, so again, restart's going to be a little bit more important in trying to gain track position when you can.
Caden Honeycutt once again the leader for this restart, as this field will fall underneath the green flag waved by Barney the Flagman. As always, we'll go back to green flag racing at Las Vegas. Honeycutt with a decent jump ahead of his teammate Vicente Salas, and then everybody fanning out already for 3rd, 4th, 5th, everything further on back in the field.
You can see at least through the top 4 or 5, again, them kind of sorting things out. And one thing I love about the Contender Series that we really get to highlight is the alliances that really drive the performance of these teams. Honeycutt and Salas, they worked together all year in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. Neither one of them really had the season that they were looking for, but you could see brought plenty of qualifying speed. We know Salas was lightning quick throughout the Contender Series all season a year ago. So those two really doing a good job, and so many teammates that are looking to join their fellow competitors in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. You talk about North Force Racing, they're pretty well represented here throughout the running of this field. Daniel Falkingham, Wyatt Tinsley, Daniel Buttafuoco, and looking to join Steven Wilson, who for that team just brought home a Coke Series championship.
A really, really impressive rise in the last 12 months for North Forest that culminated in that title for Wilson. Here's Wyatt Tinsley, one of their many drivers, the Virginia native, working his way down to the bottom, trying to work his way back into the Coke Series. He was part of the Contender Series 1 year ago, and finished top 20 in points. So he has the experience, being as young as he is, already very, very well seasoned with regards to finding your way through this eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series. Got a decent charge coming from behind in the form of Ryan Luza, former champion of the Coke Series, who's back racing in the Contender Series for the first time in a little bit. And then Timmy Holmes right behind him as we get a good look here at the middle of the field. Zach Novak, Daniel Buttafuoco and company right around the 10th spot.
Well, and talking about these teams and specifically these cars, it's really difficult as the years have gone on that there hasn't been much of a change. You know, we talk about with the NASCAR Xfinity Series that the package and the rules and everything kind of surrounding this car hasn't changed much in the last couple of years, and that's kind of lingered into the eNASCAR side of things as well, whereas we've gone through the Contender Series in the last several iterations, the last 3 or 4 years. There hasn't been too many drastic changes in how you want to set these cars up. These teams through the years have gotten these cars very dialed in to where they want to be. So I'm not saying that this is a fixed setup series by any means, but the amount of speed that these teams have found, they're pretty much at the upper echelon of it. There's hardly any more speed that they can find out of these race cars through building these setups. So it's all just mostly about going out there, executing, make sure you have a good handle on it. But again, these teams have had so much time with the fact that we're going to so many of the same racetracks. As you can see, Ryan Luza kind of opposite leaning down the front stretch and getting into turn 1 right now, holding on to 7th.
One of a few Texans in this field, the Houston area native, working that high line there and to the outside of Christopher Hill, one of the many drivers for Altus Esports who have been a mainstay of not only the qualifying series but the Contender Series throughout the last few years. They got a lot of their drivers in last year. It was sort of the cresting over the hill. I think 4 drivers, if my memory serves me correctly, ran in Contender last year, got into Coke, and this year it's all about Christopher Hill and Seth DeMerchant and company, and DeMerchant in particular, who has been in the Contender Series for multiple years and just hasn't quite found a way to put it together yet, wondering if this opportunity might be the one that finally gets him over the line and into the Coke Series for the first time.
Well, and that's a group that really wants Seth DeMerchant to be there. Was such an instrumental part of, you know, how many drivers that they brought into the Coke Series that were competitive right off the bat, many of which were rookies. I mean, Jordy Lopez and Tucker Minter won the team championship for Team Dillon. They were part of the Logitech Altus Esports bunch, and of course Tucker Minter had a chance to win the championship as a Championship 4 competitor in his rookie season. Michael Cozy Jr. was someone else as well, stayed in the top 20 in his rookie season in the Coke Series. So Altus has really found a lot of speed in the Coke Series, but it's been this Xfinity Series car that has held back a couple of their drivers through the years. So at least hoping this time around that DeMerchant, who's had a number of cracks to get into the Coke Series, this may finally be his opportunity to do that, as we see Brian Mercurio, somebody who, you know, through kind of the whole point situation in the postseason, some of the drops that we had a year ago, found himself just on the outside looking in. And this is why this series is so important, James. He spent an entire year down running in the trucks to just have an opportunity to get back to this spot.
Those of you who appreciate streamers who lean, I think of one Garrett Smithley, driver in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. That's a lead from Mercurio and then some. A solid, I'd say, just ballpark 10 degrees sort of tilt there to the side, trying to get every last little ounce of speed that he can. And sometimes the psychological effect of leaning actually does something. It might seem silly, but again, that's just how hard these drivers are fighting against one another to try and end up in the top 20 in points. As the field finally has strung out just a little bit, not as many side-by-side battles as we start to work our way into green flag racing, but go to the right spot in the field and you'll see it here. Novak, Brian Mercurio, Christopher Pfeffer, and the blue and orange machine up at the top there. Dylan also in the mix here too.
several drivers. And again, I think the reason you see a lot of that, particularly in these cars, James, is just the fact that you have to be so precise with this car versus what we have the next gen, where there's a lot of drafting, there's a lot of aero that you can kind of use to your advantage, or side drafting. In this car, it is all about just being as absolutely smooth as possible, something that you don't get in the Coke Series with the next gen car, which of course you have to be smooth, but there's just a different degree and a different finesse that it takes to drive this car that really requires a lot of focus, and you can't slip up. You slip up for 2 or 3 laps, it affects the rest of your run, which is again what makes this car kind of a fitting vehicle, I think, to decide if you're truly ready to go to the Coke Series. I mean, my vote would be for the 87 car, but the Xfinity car, not bad either.
Fair point there. Fair point. You get a good look here at Eddie Kerner, the Chicago, Illinois native, who had quite the finish to his eNASCAR qualifying iRacing series. Had to pick up a walk-off win at Homestead, Miami to jump into the top 20 in points and secure a place in this Contender Series. But when he did, and so here he is, finds himself in the Contender Series for the first time and running right around the 20th position, which is going to be right around the ballpark of where we're going to see so many of the good battles throughout the year, because again, the bubble's going to sit right there. So I think when we get to Texas at the end of November, we're going to spend a lot of time right around this point in the field, because there will likely be drivers that are mere points to the good or bad of that top 20 cut line.
Again, so close you can see kind of those two distinct grooves working, and despite the fact that we thought this was going to be a pretty bottom feeder track, you know, we're able to see a lot of these moves, and many drivers you can see up here kind of running that middle lane. Again, not going to hurt your tires so much, and you can see that 99 car, that's Kwame Scott that's down at the bottom, that's kind of, I don't want to say pinned down there, but not a ton of space, as now he's going to make it 3 wide. Pfeffer's able to react to it. Mercurio has to slide up a little bit, and those are the type of moves that we're talking about. You have to be careful when making these type of moves, but unfortunately for Kwame Scott, just cannot find a way off the bottom, and it seems with the way that middle groove is rolling right now, kind of reminds me of South Boston Speedway this past weekend, where that upper groove, you can kind of keep that driver pinched down there, and it's really hard to make it work, especially in 1 and 2.
Especially in 1 and 2, because the inside line here at Las Vegas down at the bottom is way bumpier than that middle groove. So I'm not surprised at all that drivers who run the middle on that side of the racetrack are finding success, finding speed, and finding their way towards the front. Ideally here, you sort of run the middle of 1 and 2, and then you could come down to the bottom in 3 and 4. Now, if you've got a car that handles well enough and you can make that inside line work in 1 and 2, more power to you. But more often than not, we'll see these drivers slide a little bit higher up the racetrack once they come into 1 and 2. As you look at last season's Contender Series champion, Joey Brown out of Houston, Texas, who didn't quite have the success he wanted in the Coke Series this year, so back to the Contender Series for him, but don't think he'll mind it all that much given just how much success he had in this series 1 year ago. Won 3 of the 7 races, so almost half the year he went to victory lane, and to look for more of the same this time around to get back into the Coke Series for 2024.
Definitely somebody, I think, that just really takes a liking to this car. And, you know, that's something when we get a lot of these guys that come up through the qualifying series running Road to Pro and getting into the trucks, that they take very well to that vehicle, and then they get in the Xfinity car and it just doesn't quite work out. Again, I'm Exhibit A of that, but there's kind of the opposite, where you have drivers that can kind of tolerate the trucks. It doesn't really fit their skill set, but they want to get into this Xfinity Series car because they know that they can handle it so well. And definitely Joey Brown is somebody that fits into that camp, where just how precise he has to be in this car, there's just something that suits his skill set and is able to make things a little bit easier for him. He's picked up about 3 or 4 spots since we started this race. Started back in 22nd, running in 19th right now, which, again, you're looking for a top 20. He's doing his job.
I think, to your point, Blake, we should also note that this car, especially compared to the truck and to the car that we use in the NASCAR, or the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series, say that 10 times fast, has more horsepower and a little bit less downforce by comparison. So you do have a little bit more off-throttle time. You do have to worry about rolling back into it. It's not so much about carrying momentum as it is making sure that you hit your entry, your exit, and your throttle off and throttle on points. That, especially over a long green flag run, is what leads to fast laps in this machine.
Certainly so, and there's a little bit of slip that you can have in this car that you just don't really get with the next gen car. You're kind of hooked up, and then if you slip a little bit, those cars are a big handful, and it's really easy to slide and spin out if you barely get that car out of shape. And that's just not necessarily the case with this Xfinity Series car, that there's a little bit of wiggle room to where you can kind of drive the car a little bit closer to the edge, if you will. As you can see, this racetrack has developed, James, everybody running that middle through turns 1 and 2, and hasn't been much of a change up front so far. Caden Honeycutt, Vicente Salas, the two teammates running pretty easy right now at the front of the field. Started 1-2 and have not looked back.
And this is a partnership that I love, because it's partially born out of their love for sim racing, but partially because both of these drivers have a lot of real-world experience racing as well. Vicente came through the karting ranks and was able to win a little bit this past year during NASCAR Advanced Auto Parts Weekly Series competition at Hickory Motor Speedway, just about an hour north of Charlotte. And Caden Honeycutt, of course, we know his success at one in the ARCA Menard Series West a few weeks ago at All-American Speedway up in Northern California, and then also has made starts in the NASCAR Truck Series, runs in the Solid Carriers Cars Tour. So these are two drivers that not only like to do it in the sim, but also race in real life, and that's part of what's driven their partnership and allow them to become really close as teammates and allow them to be really, really fast, which we're seeing in full display here at Las Vegas.
I remember leaving a NASCAR weekend a couple of weeks ago, saw Vicente at the airport, and was kind of talking about how these two have worked together, and really just kind of came out of necessity in a way, that both these drivers just didn't have anybody to work with their respective teams, and just kind of found each other through the midst of the Coke Series season, and have really hit on something when it comes to these Xfinity Series cars, and looking to make some strides. I know Honeycutt said earlier today, I'm tired of being a field filler in the Coke Series, and he's in the World of Outlaws. He runs a lot of different of the elite World Championship Series here on iRacing, and looking to kind of take that next step after what was his second season in the Coke Series for both drivers.
A little bit further back in the field, you've got Ray Alfalla, he of the 4 Series Championships. That I feel like we've told that story a good chunk. You've also got Matthew Zwack, Brandon McKissick, and Derek Bordeaux. So you have the Quebecois, the Canadian in Bordeaux, and then you have Zwack and McKissick, who have a little bit of experience in this Xfinity Series car, not only through Contender, but also through the eNASCAR College iRacing Series that both of those drivers have competed in recent times. Zwack, of course, the University at Michigan student, and Brandon McKissick currently enrolled at Florida Atlantic University. So the Wolverine and the Owl fighting each other for spots a little bit further back.
This is the car they used to compete in that series, so something that they're very familiar with. It's just the only difference is that you're having to build the setup and do everything necessary at this point. As you can see, this group's really starting to widen out 3 and 4. Saw who was that just up the road? Eddie Kerner started running the high side at 3 and 4, and a couple more competitors have followed him up there. And a nice attire there for old 4-time right there with the shake and bake crew shirt right there for Ray Alfalla as he's trying to work his way in the top 20.
We're going to back to right around when his own sim racing career started, as he will try and pull the Cal Naughton Jr. spirit to the front of this field. And Cal did end up in victory lane at the end of the movie, so, that maybe there might be a little bit more good luck than we know in the getup. But for now, Alfalla is fighting in the middle of the field, and he was not happy about losing his place in the Coke Series, given that he had been able to make it back every single year and had never missed out on it. He has been motivated all year to try and get back, and when he made it into the top 20 of points in the qualifying series, he said the comeback drive is still on. So I have no doubt Ray Alfalla is maybe the most motivated driver of all to make it back to the Coke Series and prove a point that his skills translate beyond the years, beyond decades. good shot of the field fanning out just in front of Alfala, and that's where a lot of the battles have been. They really have not been able to find any sort of opportunity to go single file once you get to about 15th or so on back. That's where all these battles are between Alfala and company. Anthony Burrows is there. All sorts of good stuff here.
A lot of good racing right here. And again, Alfala kind of trapped, at least on the bottom right now as we've gone on. It seems like that higher lane, especially in 3 and 4, you can just see how much momentum that Kwame Scott's able to carry up there and able to go to the top side. Might look to make it 3 wide into 1 and 2. But again, we just haven't seen that upper groove really work as well, at least all the way by the wall in 1 and 2. Kwame's trying to do it, and actually he's going to be able to just get on the outside of Burrows. That was close. Alfala's going to have to check up. He may lose a handful of spots. So if I'm a spotter, if I'm a crew chief, of which there are many in this field, I'm going to take note of that and see if this high lane just isn't rolling right now, because at least for the moment it is. And you can see how contentious it's getting with drivers trying to make a move up there. Taylor Hurst trying to poke to the outside of Brian Mercurio.
Back up to the front end to Caden Honeycutt, who has stretched it just a little bit on Vicente Salas. A 0.3 of a second lead on the timer. Call it about maybe 4 or 5 car lengths between those two on track. And then everybody else in the top 10 well clear of proceedings. There's a significant gap between Timmy Holmes and Dylan Alt, about 1.5 seconds from Holmes to Alt, and then you get this big group here that Brian LaPrade leads and runs all the way back to basically the rest of the field for the most part.
Yeah, there's a long line of cars that are waiting all behind Dylan Alt. Again, that's 11th on back. And that's really where you're seeing these drivers kind of experiment and go up to the wall. See drivers running everywhere, everybody up front. Obviously, it's working for them. There's really no need to change anything to try and stay out as long as possible. You're going to use a little more fuel running the wall, obviously. So if you're up there, you might as well stay out and try to stay out as long as possible to not get caught and get trapped. And we're kind of coming up on that point of the race, James, that we said the fuel window was about 54 laps. I'd imagine that we're going to see most of the field kind of split that evenly around lap 50. We may see a couple drivers come in a lap or 2 prior, a couple come in a lap or 2 later for the most part, but we are coming up on that point. And Las Vegas Motor Speedway, James, is a very difficult pit road to get on cleanly. And if we're going to do it under green flag conditions, as you see Keister a little bit off the pace further back in the pack.
Keister, you saw a slide on your screens there momentarily. Also, we had a good look at Anthony Burrows for about 1.5 laps, and I noticed that Burrows carrying a not a outright throwback, but a pretty strong throwback to Mark Morton's 2002-2003 scheme when he had a primarily black machine. So hoping that he can channel a little bit of Mark's success, especially here at Las Vegas, where Martin was the inaugural NASCAR Cup Series winner in real life in 1998. A little bit further back, this is Jonathan Delaney, the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania native, to the outside of Colin Keister, the Maryland native. So near each other, physically near each other on the racetrack. Not too much separation between those two as they fight for 32nd and 33rd at the moment.
I think the reason that you see, you kind of see the running order there for 33rd, you see a lot of drivers who kind of started at the tail end of the field. There's really just one that has stuck out in terms of gaining a ton of positions. That's been Caden Rush. Started back in 40th and is all the way up here in 26th. And that may not sound like a lot, but through half the race, he's passed a ton of cars, many of which started in front of him. Everybody started in front of him, I guess is a way that you could term it. But Caden Rush, somebody that right now is running in 26th. These are the type of runs that can really separate you when trying to make this series. You're not always going to go out here, especially your first time out in this series, set the world on fire. You're going to be running at the front. But if you can take a 40th place start, overcome that, and kind of move your way towards the top 20 to where it's kind of a flat race in terms of not really gaining on the cut line but not losing any either, that's a big statement right there. So Rush kind of keeping his cool, has a lot of speed in his race car, and doing a terrific job up 14 spots in 47 laps. Pretty impressive.
The good news for Caden is that he's up 14 spots. The bad news is that being in 26 still puts you behind the top 20, which is where you need to target if you want an opportunity to make the top 20 in points in this series. So I would say there's still a little bit of work to do for him. Now, if we look at some of the other drivers in this field and look at drivers who have been able to climb the ladder a little bit, Dylan Alt's a name that stands out to me. Started in 21st, currently running in the 11th position, up 10 spots, and has gained more spots than anyone else in the top 20 as it stands from what I can tell. Joey Brown has also made some moves too, up to 14th after starting 22nd, so up 8 spots for the Houston, Texas native. And those are the kinds of performances that you want if you have aims of getting back to the Coke Series. And of course, both of those drivers, Coke Series drivers from this past year, as we start to see some of the field come down on pit road. Daniel Buttafuoco in for service along with Taylor Hurst, working our way towards the halfway point at lap 50.
And that was very close because, again, the lane you have to pit from here in Las Vegas is right along the bottom of 3 and 4. Nearly contact as they were entering pit road. This is kind of the worry when this race gets strung out. You just don't want anything to go wrong if you're one of those cars that elects to come down about a lap earlier. So Joey Brown's going to lead a line of a couple of cars. Think somebody got a shot. It may have been Kerner that got a little bit wiggly. May have gotten a little bit of contact from somebody, but so far so good as you can see 5 cars have elected to come down this time.
Joey Brown, Briar LaPrade, Eddie Kerner, Agnel Phillip, Colin Keister, the ones that have come in on lap 49, working our way towards lap 50, and we'll see if the leaders decide to duck in or stay out. Looks like Wyatt Tinsley will make his way down pit road, and we'll wait to see if anyone else in the pack decides to join him. And there is one other car that will come in for service, and that would be Michael P. Frisch. So we still wait upon about the top 25 cars to come in for service as we just cross halfway at Las Vegas.
I think we're going to see a ton of cars this time, and yeah, the radio's pretty busy. We're going to see a majority of the field, I would say, that's still out on the racetrack. Going to split this race perfectly in the middle. They completed 50. They're going to try to do another 50 right there. Honeycutt, though, oh man, may have lost a little bit of his lead. He was lucky he had Salas behind him, who I think was going to give him a lot of leeway right there. You'd hope that he didn't speed. We'll take a look. Doesn't look like he has a black flag. So very lucky there. He's able to get down to pit speed and didn't make any contact on pit road.
You can see that Salas entered pit road a little bit higher than Honeycutt just to make sure that there wouldn't be any issues if in fact Honeycutt had issues with pit road entry. Meanwhile, Ryan Luza has decided to come in along with Christopher Hill, who is also in for service. More drivers coming down for service. Derek Bordeaux is in, Colin Bowden is in, Anthony Burrows is in, and Jonathan Delaney also in for service. And look at Ray Alfala trapped in the middle of cars that have yet to come down pit road and cars that are coming back out after service.
Yeah, this is where it's going to get pretty contentious here. You kind of have a few cars that have pit, several that have not. They're going to be kind of clashing here for the next couple of laps. You can see the speed difference there for Salas, kind of rolling on the top and almost a little bit of contact with Femi Olot. So this is where these next couple laps could be pretty scary for some of these competitors. They're hoping for, again, they don't want a caution because it's obviously going to put them a lap down. So they just got to be a little bit careful trying to get around some of the slower traffic that's pretty much going to have to come to pit road within the next lap or two.
Daniel Smallwood is your leader as it stands, and he is elected to stay out, as has Seth the Merchant, as has everybody outside of Caden Rush, who is now down for service and is the only one to make his way onto pit road at lap 54 of 100.
Heck, one driver we had pit very, very early, Derek Justice, was running in about 37th or 38th. He pit on lap 44, so would actually be running directly behind Honeycutt right there, what would be the eventual cycle for the race lead. But Derek Justice kind of trying to flip this race on his head after he kind of fell back a couple of spots early on. Smallwood finally pits. The Merchant looks like he's going to stay out. Alfala is down to the pits. So is Femi Olot. So just about a handful or so left that haven't elected to pit just yet. They could probably go a couple laps further if you're Holzer or Helton. Since they came down on lap 4, I imagine they would have added fuel. So about lap 60 is pretty much the furthest that they're likely going to be able to go.
DeMerchant, Zwack, and King are the final 3 that have yet to come in for service. And Seth DeMerchant just about got sideways there on entry, but makes it in. He'll come in, as will Zwack, as will King, as will Helton. So that's everybody, and that should cycle around Caden Honeycutt to the race lead once he can get back to business and get back around to the front stretch.
Well, it looks like James Holzer is going to be the last one that's holding out here. But again, probably a lap or 2 at max is how far that he's going to be able to go. Somebody that's been running down in the trucks for Road to Pro for a while and kind of parking himself in front of the lead. And they're going to crash. One car spins down to the pit lane. No caution just yet, as Holzer keeps it rolling. Again, all yellows are automatically thrown by iRacing, and he never really spun out. He just kind of kept it along the outside wall, but getting the worst end of it directly behind him was Derek Bordeaux. It looked like, I'm not sure if Holzer was trying to pit and he kind of overshot it because he drifted up about a lane and a half. And unfortunately, Bordeaux, fresh tires, nowhere for him to go, and he gets spun down into the pit lane. He's going to have to serve a black flag because of that.
So a rough start to Derek Bordeaux's Contender Series. Worth noting that you do get 1 drop amongst this group, so you may have the opportunity to claw it back if you are Bordeaux over the course of the season, but it's not the way you wanted your Contender Series to start, because you are very much behind the 8 ball going into next week's race at Homestead, Miami. Meanwhile, Holzer, after all that, technically speaking, is still scored the leader, though he'll have to come down pit road. But that's the danger of staying on so late. The difference in speed is so great between old and new tires that sometimes, as you are hoping to get the yellow flag, you run the risk of becoming the very yellow flag you want to see from someone else.
Yeah, and that was just a little bit of a mistake on his part. When you slip up like that just a little bit, it's going to be a little more costly when everybody else is just rolling around you on those fresh tires. But again, came down to lap 4. Really imagine here that it's really only going to be a lap or 2. Has a significant amount of damage, and fortunately probably not going to be able to recover without a little bit of help. But heck, I remember having to implement this strategy at Nashville. I was so slow that you might as well just try and stay out as absolutely long as possible and hope that something happens behind you that could put you back into this. All he needs is 1 yellow here. Has a little bit of damage, but at least would flip his track position completely.
It would be really, really big. The problem is that Caden Honeycutt and Vicente Salas are gaining on him at the rate of about a second or 2 per lap, and he has an 8-second lead now, so only a handful of laps before Honeycutt and then complete the cycle and get back to the front. Anyways, you get another look from our camera. It's not the front straightaway at what happened to James Holzer. Meanwhile, further back, Dylan Alt, Taylor Hurst and company fighting for position. Timmy Holmes also here too. This is right around the 11th and 12th position. Wyatt Tinsley and Derek Justice just ahead.
I think at least one notable occurrence that I believe happened was, I think Caden Rush had to serve a drive-through penalty after speeding. So we talked about kind of his, rush, no pun intended, through the field. It looks like, unfortunately for him, he had to come down and pit a second time. So was wondering why he was a lap down. He was one of those last cars to pit and was driving up through the field, and went back and saw that he did indeed have to serve a drive-through for speeding. So unfortunately for him, after being really strong in this race, unfortunately may have to relegate this to a drop. But that's one thing we could talk about, James, is the fact that in this 7-race series, you do have 1 drop week. Only your top 6 points races count towards making the top 20, top 21. The problem is, James, it's really hard to overcome using that drop in the first or second race. It's a really difficult thing to do, but certainly going to have to be the case for him, Derek Bordeaux, and even Ryan Doucette, who had a little bit of an internet connection issue to the server. He fell out. He's currently running 5 laps down, so definitely going to be behind the 8 ball after the first race in this one, or those couple of drivers.
Statistically speaking, if you look at the last 2 or 3 years of data in the Contender Series, those who have eventually advanced into the Coke Series have used their drop anywhere usually between the 3rd and 5th races. So a few 6s and 7s in there in what has usually been a 7-race schedule, but it's later on in the calendar that you would like to try and use it. As we look at Daniel Smallwood, remember he was one of the last ones to come down pit road, and now he is beginning to claw his way back through the field. The Louisville, Kentucky native currently scored in the 18th position, but you can see it already gaining on Brian Mercurio just ahead of him.
I think at this point it's always interesting to kind of look at the running order and see, okay, so who was in the Coke Series last year? Where are they running? How many drivers that were in the series a year, or at least this past season, that are inside the top 20 right now? There are only 5 drivers that were a part of those 20 to get relegated down to this series that are running outside the top 21 at the moment. So at least 5 new, or at least a couple of new competitors. That means that we're running in the top 20 that were not a part of the series a year ago. You can see, at least looking down at your running order, that would include Hill, Buttafuoco, would also include Briar LaPrade, although he was in the series in 2022. Taylor Hurst as well, somebody else who was in 2022. So at least you look at the top 20, a ton of Coke Series experience amongst that group, and very few would be true rookies to the series. I think Eddie Kerner and Michael P. Frisch would be one of the few in that situation, as well as Buttafuoco and Hill.
Buttafuoco and Hill were the 2 that I were looking at, 7th and 8th. When we look at the drivers who have no prior Coke Series experience outright, they are the highest running in the field in 7th and 8th respectively, as we see Smallwood continue to mount his charge, working underneath Briar LaPrade for what would be the 13th position that he now has exiting turn 4.
Take a look at Briar LaPrade, and somebody who didn't do too poorly in his first Coke Series season, was one of those drivers that, we kind of have this wide range of drivers who, kind of finished at the very bottom end of the standings, and those who were kind of fighting to stave off relegation up until the very last race. And LaPrade was kind of included in that group in his Coke Series season in 2022. And Contender just did not go his way last year. A lot of bad luck. But somebody who's been very consistent throughout the Truck Series season in this Road to Pro, and somebody that they would like to have back up at the top echelon of the series. And I kind of think about it, James, it's a little bit of an interesting point when you think about these drivers trying to claw their way back, and a team like Junior Motorsports now that will almost certainly have an opening with Michael Conti. You'd imagine Kevin King, if he were able to get his way back into the series, would return to that car. And LaPrade was somebody that they really liked at Junior Motorsports. You can remember he was at their fan day, he was selling shirts, and they're really happy to have him there. I'm sure they'd like to welcome him back if he's able to get back in that series.
Also has returning support from Cameron Ledford and Ledford Billiards Supply, longtime supporters of Briar's efforts here in eNASCAR. That may be the longest tenured partner-driver partnership that I can think of in any of the top 3 eNASCAR series. And happened to run into Cameron and Briar at the eNASCAR Championship at the NASCAR Hall of Fame, as we look a little bit further back in the field, just behind Briar at this battle for 16th. And I kid you not, Briar and Cameron could just about be doppelgangers for one another. They look that similar to one another. So I almost wonder if the partnership has sort of played into that you become the same person when you work together as long as you have. Meanwhile, Timmy Holmes back here trying to hold off Daniel Smallwood. Holmes was the youngest driver in the Coke Series, and I believe 16 years old this past season, and trying to keep Daniel Smallwood at bay. Smallwood's really been able to make the fresh tires work, but we see over time that the fresh rubber loses its advantage and the times sort of normalize here. So for Smallwood, there's a lot of emphasis on trying to get as much track position as you can as early as you can before the tires wear out and you lose the advantage that you gain by pitting later.
Yeah, about 25 laps in or so is where you'll really start to see the tires kind of level off with everybody else as far as they're running. Holmes pitted about 5 laps prior, so you can see there's still a little bit of an advantage there for Daniel Smallwood. This wasn't so much of a home run or Hail Mary call for him to stay out that long. He was that confident in his race car. And again, there's a lot more leeway to do that, James. I know we talk about it several times, but again, when the goal is top 20, it's not necessarily to win the race. You're avoiding risk whenever you can. You may cost yourself a spot or two at the end of the day, but it's a lot better to do that than to pit early, find yourself behind the 8 ball, caution comes out, and then you're having to dig yourself out of a hole. It's just one of the unique things about this series in particular, where the goal isn't always to win, it's to evade risk. And I think you see that especially late in these races. We don't often see a lot of late cautions, which is the complete opposite of what we saw in the Coke Series this season. But again, you're going to see right here a little bit of difference in strategy. Joey Brown been very fast working his way up through the field. But it's just one of those cases where you're going to see a lot more room given, a lot more respect amongst these competitors, because yes, every point, every position matters at the end of the day, but the last thing you want to do is put yourself in a situation where you're having to overcome a mistake or overcome some type of big loss or being in an accident.
You will not take yourself out of, or rather, you will not clinch a place early as they go 3 wide a little bit further back. You won't clinch a spot in the Contender Series tonight, but you can make it really, really difficult to have any opportunity to clinch later on with a bad run. So this is partially about minimizing risk, but also I think about not beating yourself, as Briar LaPrade will slide in just behind the 98 machine of Eddie Kerner and will continue to motor along that middle lane there and try and keep Michael P. Frisch pinned down to the bottom. Frisch, somebody who has run so many different events and cars, especially on the oval side of iRacing. Blake, I know you've run against Frisch in so many different kinds of cars, not just this car in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and someone that I think the community is definitely cheering for, but also somebody who, sort of like Seth DeMerchant, needs to find that next level up in order to make it into the Coke Series, where we know he's had success in a lot of places, but needs to show it when it really matters.
Well, and I think, one of the things that kind of separates drivers like that who clearly show the talent capable of running at this level is just that extra little bit of commitment. And I think that's one thing that's been a lot different this year from Michael P. Frisch, is the amount of time and effort that he is dedicating to making these cars faster. It takes a lot of pride in being a part of Norris Force Racing and being a part of their process of finding speed, and was really proud again of the fact that, we talk about these teams and how much work that they do in each of these respective series. There's a lot of drivers, James, that weren't a part of the Coke Series this season that were direct contributors to Steven Wilson's car and setup at Homestead Miami and winning the championship. And you'll find that at a lot of these technical teams on the iRacing side of things. And Frisch was kind of one of that group that was a part of that process, even though he wasn't in the series itself. So there's a lot of crossover here between drivers, competitors, setup builders, and everybody who kind of makes these things possible, as we see a lot going on. And one driver's going to go around the 41 of Brian Mercurio right in the middle of the back straightaway. He does not get hit by anybody else as Colin Keister and he tangled off of the second corner. And late in this one with 20 laps to go, second caution of the night.
Amazing that no one hit Mercurio, given that he spun in a dead center of the back straightaway. So I imagine his heart rate definitely jumped up a little bit as we saw him grab a quick drink of water. But how this changes the back end of this race, and if you're somebody like a Joey Brown, like a Daniel Buttafuoco, who came in a little bit earlier than everybody else, you just won the lottery with this yellow.
Yes, you did. That was a big gain. But I think this opens up a lot of possibilities. Here's James. Do you take 4? Do you take 2? I think if you're up front, again, you're minimizing risk. You probably make a good case here to take 4. But if you're somebody that's 25th, 30th, you really have nothing to lose. Maybe try to take 2. Again, try to crack into the top 20 if you can. There's a lot of different options here. And again, if you're these crew chiefs, you're these teams, you have to get ready. What adjustments do you make to try to make this car good for 20 laps? As Caden Rush, you can see he stays out, but I believe he was the lucky dog, so he'll get the waiver out.
So it's all eyes on pit road and who decides to go with 2 and who decides to go with 4. All of the leaders here look like they're going to go with 4 tires, just we can look at the replay and show you what happened. Mercurio came up. Hard, I think, to pin down on either one of them. Just with the way you exit turn 2 at Vegas, natural that you'd see Mercurio sort of slide up towards the fence a little bit. But if Keister's there and he's to the inside of LaPrade, there's not much you can do if you're calling Keister either.
No, I mean, Keister looks like he may have gotten a little bit loose, but he also gave a fair amount of space to Briar LaPrade. So I would just say kind of 2 drivers there between Mercurio and Keister. Mercurio thought that Keister would be a little bit higher. Keister definitely gave a little bit of room. We'll see it one more time. This is from Keister's vantage point. You can see just a little bit of a wiggle there on the exit of the corner. And, you know, once he kind of hooked him, he kind of just turned left, because I think at that point you got to be a little bit of a self-preservationist. But again, great job by the rest of the field. I mean, Jonathan Delaney, Seth the Merchant, Ray Alfala were some drivers that were directly behind that. And even for Mercurio, yeah, he's going to have a little bit of ground to make up here. But at the end of the day, didn't really get any damage out of that, so still at least has something to fight for here in the last 20 laps.
Could be a case where you get damage and then your chances to really perform here are really shot in the tube. So that's something that could have gone a lot worse for Mercurio. And also worth noting, sort of while we're on that subject, remember Blaze Crawford and the damage that he took to the left front in that wreck about lap 3 or 4 or so? He's worked his way back up into the 18th position, so not a terrible rebound for Crawford given the circumstances. Working our way towards green flag racing once again. Lights should be off on the pace car this time by. We'll wait and see if we end up getting ready to go double file back to green flag racing in a moment. But Honeycutt and Salas have paced this field since the drop of the green flag. And let's talk to the Alito, Texas native before we go back green flag racing. Caden Honeycutt. Caden, you and Vicente have had speed throughout this race. How much did you 2 work together, and what generally did you all do to prepare for tonight's race at Las Vegas?
Man, honestly, like, this is the most prepared I've ever been for a race in a long time. Just, I've been able to put a lot of preparation for this. I'm tired of not being competitive in Coke for myself. I gotta rise to the standard. I gotta be better. So I'm taking this a whole lot more serious. I've raged things in my life to win $100,000 next year. That's the only reason why I signed back up for this. Man, just a lot of testing hours. Thanks to Dead Zone and Vicente and Dave Silman, everybody, Cody Bias for all the hard work. Man, we hit the generator weather right. This was a little bit colder than what I thought it was going to be, but it's turned out good for us. We chose the right set, thankfully, and now we got about 15, 16 more laps to finish it off. So got to hit the start right and see what we can try to cap off our first Road to Pro Contender win. So that's what we're going to try to do.
Blakey's got a whole field of drivers that he'll have to keep at bay, but he's also had one of the fastest cars all night.
He certainly has, and, you know, especially at this point, just got to get a clean restart. Imagine that he and Vicente are working together, probably going to give each other a countdown here to try and get a good launch through the restart zone, which again is a little bit different. Haven't always had the restart zone here in iRacing, something that's changed a little bit in this series and when these drivers are going to launch. But yeah, just have to get through this cleanly. The rest of the field, though, this is where it's going to get really interesting, because I think a little bit of that courtesy that was exchanged early on, you're not really going to see that anymore. And yeah, you can see it right there. Great launch by your top 2. Definitely some communication. You can see them talking about it. And they get a fantastic launch through the restart zone.
I was about to say, you could see Caden count it off. 3, 2, 1, and then they both went. And when you're working with a teammate, it makes it very easy to control these restarts. You both get the launch at the same time, and more often than not, you get a good jump on everybody else, which they had to the tune of about a car length over Daniel Falkingham in third.
Already several drivers further back in the field looking to go all the way up to the top. Taylor Hurst ventured up there, so did Blaze Crawford. couple more already using it. So yeah, that little bit of just kind of get in line, ride around. Certainly not going to be the case now. Taylor Hurst has been able to make up several positions up there along with Crawford. So that third lane, it is rolling right now.
Yep, lots of drivers beginning to make their faces known at the front for the first time. Zach Novak, a driver that we've not talked about all that much, the 2019 eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series champion, riding in the 5th position as the yellow flag comes out once again. There was a lot of trouble in the middle of the front stretch, Blake.
Yeah, there was. We talked about everybody kind of going for themselves at this point, and the car that spins around, it's, oh man, it is Blaze Crawford. We were just talking about how well he was making the high side work, and well, actually it's going to be a bit of a case 4 wide off of the corner. Briar LaPrade, Eddie Kerner, looks like they're going to get a piece of this as well, and actually Kerner, I think, is going to get the worst end of it in terms of the damage that he has on his race car. I think that's going to be a meatball flag for him, definitely going to be one for Blaze Crawford as well. But yeah, I mean, Crawford was making it work. He ducked underneath Timmy Holmes. He had a little bit of a run. You see how much speed he's able to carry through the center of the corner, and he saw a gap, he went for it, and it just tightens so much off the corner, tightens up so much on corner exit, just not able to make the rest of it work. And again, lucky considering he spun across the entire field. That was only, what, him and kind of the 3 cars that were involved here. You see LaPrade get a little bit of damage out of it as well. Pfeffer's able to go around. But man, a tough luck there for Blaze Crawford. He had made up about 3 or 4 spots since the drop of the green flag.
A look on board Femi Olat's machine as you see them squeeze together on corner exit, which you have a funneling effect here at Las Vegas on the exit of turn 4 in particular. It's not as pronounced as what we'll see with some of the other tracks we'll go to, you know, on the calendar in the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series. Dover in particular stands out as a place where coming off of turn 2, it feels like you lose almost a whole lane getting onto the back straightaway. But especially when you are racing on restarts, when you go 3 and 4 wide, that can happen and it can lead to incidents down the front straightaway. And Kerner lost a lot of the front clip. I don't think LaPrade's damage really is going to make all that much of a difference, if anything, especially when you consider he already had right rear damage to begin with, and then we'll have to see what happens with Blaze Crawford. A lot of the damage to his car this time was on the rear, so we'll see how much that hurts or helps or what have you. I think if anything, it's the track position that you're lamenting if you're Crawford, going from about middle of the pack to now back to 38. Field beginning to start thinking about doubling up at least. You see Honeycutt trying to clean off the tires there up in the top groove, and we'll bring in one more driver. Blake McCandless has found Ryan Luza, 2017 champion of the series.
Catching up here with Ryan Luza, running up in the top 5, and Ryan, we're definitely somebody you always look to run really strong in these cars, but what's kind of your mindset here approaching the last 10 laps or so on this short run?
I mean, we just kind of want to bring it home. I think we have a competitive car that can win, but it's all just track position, really hard to pass. So if we can just bring this home, top 5, top 6, even lose a couple, I'm not too, I'm not disappointed with that. Just want to get the season start off with a, good finish. So nothing crazy. I mean, if we can get up there and try to go for a win, we will, but just safety over everything right now.
Is that kind of the mindset, especially, if you can finish off this round, or at least this first race, get a top 5 finish here, does that kind of, affect your approach for the next couple of weeks, being able to have this great start if you're able to finish it out?
Yeah, I mean, it's just safety, really, less stress. If you can just have a good start to the year, it's a lot less pressure on. You don't need to take risks or do anything crazy. So that's the goal, just try to come in here and, get top 10s, top 5s for the first little bit of the year. And then if stuff starts going wrong, then we're maybe okay. But with this short of a season, anything can happen. So just need to get these good finishes while we're up here.
All right, Ryan, we'll let you get back to it. Best of luck.
Thank you.
2017 Coke Series champion Ryan Luzer was also very close in 2020 to winning the title as well. So he's had experience in fighting for the biggest share of the prize in eNASCAR, looking to get back to that place for 2024, and currently has that number 4 machine in 4th place. So second car on the outside, not a bad place to be. Although we mentioned a little bit how we might see some tire strategy when the cars came in under that recent yellow 10 laps ago. Pretty much everybody took 4 tires. I'm not seeing a single car, as a matter of fact, that tried to chance 2 tires, and that speaks to just how much these drivers believe in fresh rubber to try and get towards the front.
I think the biggest question here is, James, kind of where that mentality changes, right? We heard Ryan talk about, being safe and kind of managing your situation. Where does that mentality kind of end, where you're really starting to thinking about gaining positions? 15th is a little bit further back, a little bit further up the road, and how aggressive you're going to be kind of defending your track position. I would imagine after what we saw in that last restart, there's definitely going to be more of an emphasis on just trying to get to the top, because even if your car doesn't work all that great up there, it's, like Ryan said, it's really hard to pass. It's hard to gain spots. A lot easier to lose it on the bottom than I think if you're able to roll the top side pretty good.
You don't have those bumps to deal with in turns 1 and 2. That also, I think, will factor into the decision-making of a lot of these drivers. 10 laps to go here at Las Vegas in the season opener for the 2023 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series. And again, Caden Honeycutt and Vicente Salas with a great start. But look at that, almost 5 wide going into turn 1.
Oh, and Daniel Buttafuoco made a huge move, and there's going to be several cars involved. Colin Bowden, Christopher Pfeffer, Dylan Alt, Joey Brown, as we saw them fan out, as you mentioned, James, nearly 5 wide through the tri-oval, which again, the apron is fair play if you want to go down there and try to make a move. And I think Daniel Buttafuoco got a huge run, pinned himself on the bottom, and there was just a collection of cars, I think, not expecting to go into turn 1 3 or 4 wide. And I think you saw the answer right there. We were talking about how desperate do you get to be when you just kind of find that balance between maintaining where you're at and trying to improve your position. Apparently it's around 10th, because that's where Buttafuoco was running, and that's kind of where that lane, that 4th or 5th row, is where everything kind of broke loose.
A lot of drivers caught up in this, and I figure we'll see a fair few amount of drivers make their way towards pit lane, because there are a lot of bent pieces of sheet metal and composite on these machines that some of these drivers will want to try and get cleaned up before we go back green flag racing. But no less than, I'd say, about 10 cars involved in that in some way, shape, or form. Andrew Navarro got damaged. Dylan Alt also ended up in trouble. You mentioned Joey Brown, one of the drivers that had damage. Daniel Smallwood, we'll get a good look at it here. You see Buttafuoco down on the bottom, bounces up into Alt and into Brown, and there's nothing up at the top of the top of the fence there for this car to do, and just all sorts of chaos in the middle of the corner.
One thing I noticed, several Coke Series competitors from this past season involved in this wreck. You can see this is kind of further on back. Kerner's up in the wall. You can see Caden Rush gets a piece of it. We talked about James Holzer, who was leading when he was turned into the outside wall a little bit earlier, was a part of it. So kind of the whole reaction to this and everything kind of funneling right around Buttafuoco and Dylan Alt, all trying to make some moves up here at the front of the field. And as you can imagine, James, a lot of calls over the radio that weren't too pleased. They're asking, why the heck are we doing this with under 10 laps to go? We're all in a good points position. And take a look at it one more time. This is kind of the reaction, and nice miss there. I believe this is Kevin King. Yep, was able to get his way through that.
I think the interesting thing to me, we saw this sort of split into 2 incidents. You had the one with Buttafuoco and Alt and Brown, but we also saw Eddie Kerner get spun around. Now, Kerner had damage from the yellow just before, where he and Briar LaPrade and Blaze Crawford got into it. And Kerner elected to stay out on the racetrack and not repair the damage because he believed the track position was that important. But with that damage, he wasn't able to get going as quickly as everybody else, and they just ran up right on his rear bumper entering turn one. But I think it's an interesting case study in how much these drivers value track position, where you figure normally you'd look to come down pit road and get that car fixed, but drivers are willing to run with a very beat up race car just to try and hang on to whatever spots that they can.
Well, again, you're kind of hoping that at this juncture of the race that we may see a couple more incidents. This is why I was kind of surprised that nobody tried taking 2 tires, because all it takes is a couple more incidents like this to where you could have perhaps gained 10, 15 spots on pit road if you were able to do that, assuming that we'd get a couple of yellows. Now, that's not always the way the Contender Series plays out. I know we've seen that a ton in the Coke Series, where we'd see a lot of drivers on a 20, 30 lap run taking 2 tires, but just didn't think perhaps we would see this, with the fact that, again, it's not like we're winning and making the postseason and having a shot at $100,000. It's just trying to get to the top half of the field.
A reminder for you all that if you haven't had the chance to check it out, that the season update for the World of Outlaws game is now available on both Xbox Series S and Series X, and Xbox One, and PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, and the Nintendo Switch, which just released not too long ago. So you can run the Chili Bowl, you can run all sorts of great tracks, many of which have been pulled already from iRacing proper. So if you've got some experience on Dirt in the Sim, you likely have some experience on tracks that you'll see in the game as well. And Teros also introduced as part of the update. You get a good look here at some of the Lincoln Speedway footage. Really fun place to race. Teros really do change the game. Having to find an extra time down a straightaway or in the corner just to hit the button to clear your windshield blink, that makes an already challenging discipline of racing just that little bit trickier.
It does, and what fun it's been to see this game evolve, and that it's been such a fun game to be a part of and to play, and also the foundation that this is setting for what we're going to see in the new partnership that was announced between iRacing and NASCAR with a console game that'll be coming out as well. That game set a very proper foundation to show that iRacing's capable of putting out a great console game, and I know for NASCAR coming up, it's going to be the same as well.
I have a feeling if we talked to Steve Myers about it, he'd say it's all part of the grand plan. As we get set for a restart coming here with 4 laps to go at the line. Also, worth noting before we go green flag racing, Colin Keister started 39th and is in 11th, and Jonathan Delaney started 38th, currently running in 14th. So if they can hold that track position, those are massive gains for both of them. That would be 2 finishes inside the top 20. Really, really big ways to start off the campaign as we go back to green flag racing here at Las Vegas.
You can see Salas able to clear pretty early, but already 4 wide, about 10th on back, around where Ray Alfala is running. You see a couple drivers starting to make their way into that top 20. Max Brady hasn't really been up in the top 20 today. He's up there. Jonathan Delaney as well. Kwame Scott running very well in 13th right now. So several drivers in the back trying to make some moves and get to the positive of the point situation to end this race.
Salas and Honeycutt have cleared themselves, but look at this mess back here, right around the top 10. I see Michael P. Frisch in the mix. I see Christopher Pfeffer, dead center of your screen there. Seth DeMerchant is there. Brian Mercurio is in here as well. Everybody fighting for the last few spots, working our way towards 2 laps to go at Las Vegas.
And Brady kind of had a chance there to close the door, but elected not to. He's looking to the middle on his teammate. Pfeffer going to fall on back, and Ray Alfala again trying to get back into the top 20. Just on the cut line of where you'd want to be exiting this first race.
3 wide still further back. Everybody up front now single file at least through the top 5, and then this mess here all the way further back, right at the edge of where you want to be within that top 20, where you can fight for eligibility into the Coke Series for next year, as Caden Honeycutt comes across the line to pick up the white flag of the season opening race for the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series.
And going to be pretty straightforward for Caden Honeycutt. Again, we saw the reaction when he won the pole position. He knew how important it was going to be, but we'll see if these 2 teammates will duke it out in 3 and 4 for the final time.
No big moves from Vicente Salas, and he will ride up the track, and that will give space for Caden Honeycutt to go to victory lane at Las Vegas in a thundering celebration. You can see him pump the fist a million times over. Blake, you want to bet that this one means a little bit something to him?
Yes, it does, and I think it just goes to show you how hard these races are to win. Even when you have the speed and everything goes well, you have to execute a race front to back, be able to qualify, find the race speed, and be able to complete the job at the end of the day. And even for Honeycutt, who's had a lot of those real-world successes, you can see how much it means to him to be able to win one of these races and how important a great start is to this Contender Series. Again, you can look at the first race of the last couple of years. There's very little changing up in the top 20. It's very rare you see a winner in the Contender Series not advance. So Caden Honeycutt sets it up about as best as you could have hoped for. Started on pole, led every lap, and is burning out here on the front stretch.
And almost had the fastest lap for the Triple Crown as well. I believe Ryan Luza ends up with the fastest lap outright of this race, but Honeycutt was second in that regard too. So almost as good as it possibly could have been. As you see Vicente Salas' teammate come down to celebrate on the front stretch with them. That was a dynamic duo all night long, and they absolutely controlled this from start to finish and go 1 and 2 in the final standings. And then we also need to consider that Caden Honeycutt has raced on stages bigger than this in the Truck Series in real life. He's run ARCA. He's run a lot of real life stuff, and it meant that much to him still, which I think says a lot about how important even the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series has become. Honeycutt wins. Salas is second. Ryan Luza is third. We'll speak to them in just a few moments. Daniel Falkenham finished in the 4th spot. Christopher Hill was 5th. Zach Novak, Taylor Hurst, Timmy Holmes, Cody Bias, and Briar LaPrade rounded out the top 10 tonight.
And I got to say, Christopher Hill, what an impressive run. Probably the most, I don't want to say surprising name, but very quick ascent to the front of this field. As you can see, Tinsley Kwame Scott, a newcomer to the Contender Series with a solid 12th place, good points position. Keister Femiolot, Jonathan Dulaney, Max Brady with a great rebound. Frisch, DeMerchant, Mercurio, and Ray Alfala. How about that 4-time? Rounds out your top 20 to round out the cut line.
Matthew Zwack was 21st, Agno Phillip 22nd, Derek Bordeaux 23rd, and Brandon McKissick 24th. Anthony Burrows finished in the 25th position. Kevin King brought it home 26th. Christopher Pfeffer finished in 27th. You see the rest of the field scroll here on your screen. A lot of these drivers caught up in the late race incidents and had great points nights going, and then it just all went south very, very quickly.
Yeah, tough to see Colin Bowden, Joey Brown, Ryan Doucette, Dylan Alt, several. Again, when we talked about that wreck, a lot of drivers out of the Coke Series in 2023 a part of that, and they're going to have some holes to climb out of in the remaining 6 races.
Work to do for some of these drivers who almost had it set up beautifully, and then it all went south very, very quick. Buttafuoco might be the standout story of that bunch, but Blake McCandless, I'll hand it back over to you, and you have the opportunity to chat with our first winner in the 2023 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series, Caden Honeycutt.
Well, Caden, you said earlier today that I don't want to be a field filler in the Coke Series anymore, and I think there's no better way to make the statement that you just did, but we saw the emotion when you crossed the start-finish line. Why does this win mean so much to you?
Man, just, all the hard work that it really takes to win in these races is so much harder than I can really explain. Coming from a real-life driver, I'm telling you, this is the hardest stuff you will ever do in your entire life. The amount of hours people put in, the amount of hours that a setup is built on, the amount of driving time, the amount of queue time. Like, it just takes an entire effort to win these races. Like you said, like I have been a field for the last couple of seasons in Coke, and I really have not been able to put in a whole lot of effort into these races. Now I've been able to rearrange my life and been able to take this stuff more seriously. Like, this was the most work I've ever put in a long time, and obviously the results showed. Me and Vicente put in the same amount of driving hours, the same amount of queue time. I mean, everything. We built the car. Thanks to Dead Zone Racing, Cody Bias, Vicente, Houston, Dave. Everybody just did such an amazing job just getting this car prepared. And and it just takes so much time and effort. I'm sorry, I just have to repeat it. This is the hardest stuff you will ever do in your entire racing career, in real life or sim career. So, this brings my momentum also to the bull ring, to the ARCA West race with Bruce Cook and MMI this Friday night. So, just got to keep building. Can't stop. Like, I'm gonna get off and probably test Homestead and just start building. And we can't stop. This is only race 1 of 7, so a lot of things can change. And this has got to get better. It can't stop. And there's a lot of people that are going to take replays from this, figure out what they did wrong, and come back stronger for the next one. So we just got to be that farther ahead.
I know you're somebody that puts a lot of effort into your real-world racing as well, but what makes preparing for this so uniquely different or more difficult, as you've alluded to?
So, I mean, it's just testing time. Like, you can't just take the real-life race car and go out and test for 15 hours each and every single day when you want to. It costs money. It costs tires. It costs thousands of dollars. This, you can just sit here and press a button, a couple of clicks on a setup, and just drive for 2,000 laps and build a setup. You just can't do that in real life. And that's what makes it so much more competitive on this, is everybody has put in the same amount of driving time. Everybody, dedicates a lot of stuff and a lot of time and effort into this. So that's what makes it so much more difficult. And just real life, you just don't do that. You get 3 rounds of practice, and NASCAR, you get 20 minutes, and you either hit it or you're out in left field. So that's what's so different about this series and about Coke in general. So that's why it's just so much sweeter. And Vicente has been a brother to me the past couple of years, and me and him worked really, really hard for this. And with him going through his stuff with his team, and be able to do this with him, and entire Race with Dead Zone Houston for letting me and him come aboard and through this journey. And this is the only race. Like I said, we just got to keep going, and got 6 more to go and try to win.
All right. Well, you start the first one off. You win the pole. You lead every lap, and you win the race. And I'm not sure which had the bigger reaction, your win when you crossed the line or after you got the pole, because we had the wall pulled up. And, man, when you won the pole, we could see it. We didn't even know what the results were. You were going crazy already. Yeah. So,
yeah, just like I'm not good at I just haven't been very good at qualifying in this stuff, man. Just the way you have to, to Q cheese and all that type of stuff. Like, you've got to hit that. You've got to hit your march. You got to hit the Q setup like directly when this random weather comes through. So that's what just makes it so much difficult. And the last couple of races when Coke, I put a lot of effort into this one. It showed. So like I said, we just got to keep building, get better, and win 6 more. So that's all we're trying to do.
All right, Caden, we'll let you go enjoy it with your Dead Zone teammates. Congratulations.
Thanks, Blake.
From Caden Honeycutt, we'll jump to Vicente Salas and Chente. We just chatted with Caden, and he attributed a lot of the success tonight to the work that your team put in, not just the work that he had done or you had done or one individual. How important was it to come together as a team and put together the man hours and the laps to get this set up right?
Last year, it was kind of a story. It was just me and Dave Solman. Obviously, we won the first race. We made it back into Coke, but it was really hard just having 2 of us. So this year, we joined up with Caden. It was us 3 through the year in Coke, and we figured out, hey, let's find some people like-minded that we can go work with. So we're working with, the team, Brody Kostecki, Kevin King, and Houston Hammer, and all the guys at Dead Zone. So having this really strong core group of guys that all have the same goal of getting back in the series and succeeding once we get back is just so comforting. And I think, that the run we had tonight really shows that we're going to be a top team this series, and we're here to win the championship.
Caden spoke a lot of how his perspective has really changed, and he's really coming at this Contender series with a renewed focus, how he's prioritizing these races more, how he wants to be competitive in Coke again. You've been there. You won races in the Coke Series. So where is your mindset entering the 2023 Contender Series, and especially after a run like tonight?
I think we just want to be consistent. I mean, I know every single week going in, we're going to have the speed and we're going to be good, but it's about our mindset. It's about how we carry ourselves in the race and what positions we put ourselves in. Now, I think I made a couple moves that race, getting through lappers and whatnot, that we're a bit aggressive, more than I'd like to be. So, going into the next race, I think we'll be a little bit more conservative, knowing we have this second place to fall back on, and we'll just be going and getting points. And if we can be in a winning position to go get a win, fantastic. We want to do that. But, a win here means a lot, and it's a huge statement. But I want to go win in the Coke Series, so I need to make it back up there first to do so.
You and Caden both have a lot of experience racing in real life. We touched it on multiple points on our end of the broadcast. How does working with a driver who not only knows the sim, but knows what it's like to get behind the wheel in the real world, how does that change the way you work with each other? And how does that make it different from working with people who have primarily sim-based experience?
I think me and Caden have a really, really good understanding of each other without actually saying it. So, we'll be watching each other run laps, whether it's in real life or in the late model. And I mean, he's helped me a ton in real life with my driving, with my craft, my feedback, and everything. So I think the connection we've built and the camaraderie we've built is just second to none. So it's been awesome working with him. And I think kind of that whole race, we were on the same page with each other. When I'd get a run on him at the end there, we knew we had to work with each other and work together. So I would just push him, knowing the guys out back were coming to us. So I think it's been really nice to just be on that same page, even when we're in a race together.
Vicente Salas, P2, a fantastic opening to his bid to return to the Coke Series in 2023. One more driver that we'll have the opportunity to chat with this evening. Blake McCandless is with Ryan Luza.
Well, Ryan, we talked to you just before you ended that run. You said it was all about being safe. You're able to improve a couple of positions up into third. What does this kind of set up for you going forward the next 6 weeks or so? And are you kind of already thinking about, what a 2024 Coke Series run would look like with a start like this?
I mean, not yet. I mean, anything can happen. Just like I said, like I was saying in the interview earlier, the better start we have, the more leeway we have later on. It's a good confidence booster, though, for sure. But qualifying is just so important. I mean, we started ninth, and we're able to move up to third, which I think is pretty good in itself. But yeah, just so hard to pass. I think the main thing is qualifying, so maybe we'll kind of shift some focus to just put more and more time into Q prep and see if we can start up front, because I think that's what it's going to take to win one of these. But yeah, definitely thanks to everyone at Ryko for all the hard work. We had a good car. I think we could have won it, just didn't have the track position. Maybe a little bit longer race, but even then it would have been really hard to pass those guys. So congrats to Caden. But yeah, really good start for us, and I think we had a pretty good showing as a team.
One thing I will say, Ryan, that there are certainly some drivers where this Xfinity Series car really seems to suit their skills. Would you say that you fall into that category that you really enjoy driving this car?
Yeah, I think I like it a little bit more than the current Cup car that we have, but I haven't really ran this car in, I don't know, I'd have to say probably since like 2017, really, like since I got into Coke. So it's been fun to do something different. But yeah, I don't know, it's hard to say. I mean, because you can save tire and then go later, but it's not really worth giving up track position, right? So you can't really sit there and save. So it's just, I feel like you're kind of in a box, right? So you just have to get as much time as you can, using as little as you can. And that's what I've been good at. I feel like, my time on the service. So it's playing into my wheelhouse a little bit, but, without the team, without Ryko, not much I could do. So thanks to all the guys there, and thanks to XSET for keeping me on board.
All right, Ryan, we'll let you go. Enjoy it. Congratulations on third tonight, and we'll see you out the next 6 weeks, see how it works out for you.
Appreciate it, Blake. Thank you.
Las Vegas now in the books, and coming up, going to be a lot of fun here with the Contender Series throughout the fall. An initial look at the standings, where everything's going to line up where everybody finished, but there are some names, Blake, that you would expect to be up there that aren't, and there are some names that did exactly what we thought they would do.
You're exactly right. I think you can look at majority of this top 20. Again, I think worth pointing out Christopher Hill, what a great debut to his Contender Series, running up in the top 5. Great run for Logitech Altus and that entire group. Kwame Scott, Max Brady, Michael Frisch, Seth the Merchant, a couple of those drivers that, again, don't really have that Coke Series experience to fall back on, but they're able to find themselves above the cut line. And this is where we get to look beneath that cut line right here. You can see Kevin King, not the run that he would have wanted, got wrapped up in that incident late. Derek Bordeaux, great recovery up to 23rd considering the incident that he was involved in. You can see how the speeding penalty affected Caden Rush. Blaze Crawford involved in that incident as well, but a handful of Coke Series drivers from this past season. And also Daniel Buttafuoco down there. Again, I think this is a learning experience for him, was running up in the top 10, makes a really aggressive move. Not saying he was in the wrong, but these are kind of some of the learning things that you go through being in a position like that to get a top 10. Unfortunately, you don't end up with it.
Risk versus reward, which is a topic that you talked about a little bit earlier in the broadcast, Blake, and I think that's a great example of it. You have the opportunity to make moves, but sometimes you might not necessarily get the result that you want out of them. In 1 week time, here on eNASCAR.com/live and iRacing's channels, it's the eNASCAR College iRacing Series back in action from Charlotte Motor Speedway. That broadcast coming your way next Tuesday night, October 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern. And again, you can see that on eNASCAR.com/live and iRacing's channels on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. We also will have round 2 of the Contender Series. Homestead Miami Speedway is the next track for this series at 8 p.m. Eastern. So we'll pull a little double duty next week here on iRacing, and we'll bring you updates from the Contender Series from Homestead as we also watch all the action from Charlotte Motor Speedway in the College Series as drivers will compete for another step closer to the Coke Series in 2024 and for scholarship money in the College Series. Blake McCandless, final thoughts before we sign off from Las Vegas.
Well, again, I think pretty straightforward. Wasn't expecting to see kind of all that carnage a little bit late, but there's so much on the line. Every year this series grows, more drivers want to be a part of it. Many of these drivers, they've been trying for a long time, but at the end of the day, great execution by Caden Honeycutt, Vicente Salas to control this race, and I think setting ourselves up well to see another great race at Homestead Miami and see who's really going to separate themselves. It's one thing to go through one race, but really through two, that's when you can establish whether you're a true contender or not.
We'll see more in 1 week's time. For our team at iRacing and my colleague in the booth, Blake McCandless, I am James Pike. Thank you so much for watching iRacing's coverage of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series, and we will see you for more action from the eNASCAR College iRacing Series next Tuesday night from Charlotte Motor Speedway.